listening to the Platinum Standard in Paranormal Talk, Paratopia, with Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaney.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand spanking new Paratopia Oculus with your hosts, Jeff Ritzmann.
Hi there, it's me.
That's where you come in. And Jeremy Vaney. Hi, that's me. Well, it seems like just 8 months ago that I said, next week we're going to have a new Paratopia Oculus. And here it is next week, Jeff.
8 months later.
That's right. But what is time, really?
Indeed.
But, you know, we only seem to do these shows when we actually have something to say, and one would assume that since so much time has gone by, not exactly 8 months, but a lot of time, that we might, perhaps, one of us, or both, have something to say. So that's good, right?
Yeah, I have nothing. I hope you have something, because I have nothing.
Well, it's funny you mention that. I have something great. Specifically for you. This
okay, great.
This will be Trickster Night.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, well, in honor of your new blog, Numinous Den, or The Numinous Den, I guess it's The Numinous Den, which is what, numinousden.blogspot.com, is that right?
That is correct.
Wow. So no "the" at the beginning of the website address.
Right.
So numinousden.blogspot.com, which is excellent. It's an excellent step-by-step search of all things paranormal, from Jeff's life to skeptics to various paranormal and ufological topics, for all things Trickster. Jeff picks them out and breaks them down, and it's easily digestible, let's put it that way. So I'm all about promoting it. And I have here the Authors of the Impossible by Jeff Kripal. And I was reading this today, and I came upon this, and I thought of you, Jeff. This is the section on Jacques Vallee. And what he says here is about Jacques. What he was arguing, after all, is that UFO appearances may be part of a huge control system, a kind of mythological thermostat on the planet designed to adjust and control the belief systems of entire cultures over immense expanses of time. As he described it in his journals, this control system, quote, acts upon human consciousness, preventing it from going beyond certain limits, end quote. Vallee seems to have in mind a kind of cosmic puppet master, a manufacturer of unavoidable events, as he puts it in one of his short stories, who pulls the strings of history from above and prevents us from developing our own psychic potentials. The religious doctrines and mythologies of the human imagination are the main object of control and adjustment here. Put crudely, we are being manipulated by our own belief systems, which are in turn being implanted, influenced, and guided by quote-unquote alien forces well outside our conscious selves. So, Jeff, I read this, and I immediately thought back to our interview with Jacques Vallee when you asked him about a certain passage in the book we were treating then, which was called what?
Wonders in the Sky.
Wonders in the Sky, thank you, I'm sorry. Wonders in the Sky, and it was a passage about just that, about, some sort of ufological / religious event in the sky, right, that perhaps was poisoning people with plague, that seemed to be controlling people, in some sort of physical way. But I think your question was about that specifically, but broadly about whether this is controlling us through religion, whether they're shaping culture that way. And Vallee, if I remember correctly, said he did not believe that. Is that correct?
Right. No, that's correct. Yeah, you're right.
So do you know, did he change his mind through the years, or is he trickstering us?
No, I think Kripal's probably referring to an earlier book that, and that's the thing about Vallee is that, unlike most of ufology, he's perfectly willing to adjust and expand on whatever he might think at the moment. So he'll put out a book about whatever about idea A, and by the time he gets to the next book, idea A has become ID, ID 7, and it's just it's a completely different point than where he was before, and so then he lays out that extrapolation of whatever he might think is relevant to talk about. That's the only thing I could figure out, is that maybe Jeff was reading through I don't know, Messengers of Deception, or...
Well, I think in this point he's talking about the Invisible College, so it is one of his...
Okay, the Invisible College, then, yeah, that would be right, yeah. So, yeah, I think that might be all that is. I guess, I don't know that you could say Vallee ever seemed to be like the Trickster in any other way other than you instinctively know, and I instinctively know because I had talked to him for like 3 or 4 hours before our interview with him at one point long ago for a show that was recorded and never aired because the recording was lost. So it was basically a couple of us on the phone with him for 3-4 hours, and you do get the overwhelming sense that Dr. Vallee knows things or suspects certain things that he just doesn't talk about. For what reason, I have no idea, but it does make you infinitely curious as to what he may really think and what he may really be doing. For instance, during our interview, we had asked him about the notion that he was trying to create a Skinwalker Ranch, right? And I think at the time that was some kind of rumor, but it turned out, yeah, he actually had been trying to do that and had some moderate success about it. But you notice he really didn't expand on that during our talk. Things like that. Like, what was he doing? What was he trying to do to enact a Skinwalker Ranch? I have some ideas about that, but we honestly don't know. I just think there's a lot about him, a lot about what he thinks, and even some of the things that he may know that he kind of keeps close to the cuff. So I think he's kind of a mystery figure in a way to me in ufology.
I don't know. This may be nothing, but just as you were speaking, I sort of had a little aha, which is, part of his thinking is that perhaps this is some sort of projection being projected here from another dimension into 3D space here. That's one thing that he sort of tosses around as an idea. And pretty much everything, I'm trying to think of if there's anything that is not this, but anything that seems paranormal, mystical, ufological, has to do with the air. If it's in the ocean, it's going up into the air. If it's a ghost, it's sort of hovering in the air. There's something, UFOs are obviously the air. The beings in them, of course, we associate with aliens or space or air cloud ships, this sort of thing. So is that itself pointing to the immaterial nature of it? That all things kind of go to the invisible influences of the air, because that's pretty much the most basic way we can understand that there are invisible influences, is the wind, the atmosphere around us, and it all seems to point to atmosphere. Maybe that's a leap, but I just thought of it now, so I'll throw it out there.
I think that'd be a good idea if I wasn't the kind of person who thought that cryptid things also kind of fit into this, quote unquote paranormal category, which I do. And some of those things are, but those are very earth-based things, so that you might take that as the same kind of natural, minus the super. These are natural things of the earth, things that are not manufactured by man and not, organic, purely organic things. So
perhaps, but maybe isn't the reason that we think that cryptids are a part of this is their tendency to disappear or dissolve?
I mean, I look at it from the standpoint of that no matter what, these things can't be. They are completely elusive, just like the UFO, the ghost, the whatever. There's absolutely little to no traceable lineage of evidence to these things that you can say is concretely what it looks to be or what it pretends itself to be.
All right, so I guess I just had one more question to ask you. Now that I consider you the expert on all things Trickster and all people Trickster Theory.
Oh, great.
That's right. Which is George Hansen. Has he ever evolved his theory? Or has it been solid the entire way through?
Has he ever evolved his theory? I don't know. I know that he has definitely, because we had a good, I don't know, 3 to 4 hour long talk this past Friday, about once I would get this blog to a point where. And it's like one of these things where you start an idea because you think, I've always wanted to do something like this. And I actually was talking to George about doing something like this blog on the phone months ago. And I asked him, I said, why are more people not talking about what it is that you've latched on to here? Why are there not more blogs that are discussing this? And why are people in like parapsychology not discussing this? Because I think at the time I was taking a parapsychology course online, and he just made the statement. He goes, because a lot of people around his age and little younger, and of course the older crowd, he says they just don't get it. They don't have a clue what he's talking about. And he said mainly it's younger people that seem to be interested in this kind of theory, in this kind of theorem, and looking at it in this direction. And I found that to be just distressing. And so I thought, well, if I could put a blog together that essentially is going to not only explain the terminology in a way that is not so that it can't be I don't know, there's all kinds of ways to misunderstand this notion when you start to discuss it. And one way for it to be misunderstood is for somebody to quickly attribute it, when you say trickster, to the literary definition of trickster, which is not what we're talking about. We are to a certain point, but it's only in the most surface manner, I think. And so I thought, well, if I could kind of lay out the terminology and then start to lay out a scenario where you could see the things in play, then we take it from there. We take it into, well, let's talk about real life cases. Let's talk about real UFO cases that people are ultimately familiar with, real ghost cases that people are ultimately familiar with, which I'm writing in the process of writing now. So it's almost like, you're starting a Rosetta Stone course to learn how to speak Spanish. And, when you take these Rosetta Stone courses, they show you pictures and they kind of show you scenarios and they lay out the words for what's going on, like the red ball. And you don't say the red ball, you say the red ball in Spanish, but you don't know what you're saying until you make that visual connection. And pretty soon, you're speaking Spanish, like, amazingly enough. You know what the words are, but you haven't been told the actual definitions of the words. That's kind of the way I wanted to make this thing flow, to the point where the reader, if they read it well enough, if they comprehend what's going on, and I see no reason why they shouldn't, before you know it, they're going to start seeing these things on their own. We can have broad discussions about them. And they'd be speaking trickster before they knew it. And I think some people already have started kind of doing that, at least from the mail I'm getting about it, which is, I've had no other project that's gotten me so much mail, which is really great. But I asked George, I said, so just say for the sake of argument, which I don't think is going to happen, but let's just say for the sake of argument, that I can get the vast majority of people who would read the blog to understand, and immediately have them be able to identify these repetitive traits that some of these paranormal events have, the phenomena has, the people in the paranormal fields have, and the effects that it seems to impose upon people who study it. Suppose I can get them to recognize that. What's the next step? And the short of it is that it gets into much more than the paranormal. It gets into more along the lines of the current of the stream of conscious decision on the planet, and you can almost see like the current of, I don't want to use the word behaviors, but the current of effects on a society based upon some of these things. And I've said this, and George didn't really voice it in this way, but he said you learn a lot more than just the paranormal. You learn about a lot of other things that can also be very interesting and useful. But being as our focalized field here for me is in the paranormal phenomena, that's going to be decades of looking at this stuff, years of looking into this stuff. And I have been, I guess, to a large degree, like I started this to make people aware of it and to have them understand it, the way I got the epiphany about it. And it's kind of turned into me making certain discoveries about this through that. And so I feel like I'm also expanding on what I've learned from George. Now I'm walking with it, which is really great, because and this is another post that I'm going to start writing probably tomorrow or the next day about all matter of ritual and the presence of ritual in places in your life that, I don't care what religion you are, I don't care what color you are or what race you are, you have them. And you don't know where they came from. These are just things that you always did. And you don't even recognize some of them as ritual, but they are indeed ritual, and they do indeed take place at these liminal points in time, which says something pretty profound, in my opinion. It says that essentially that the phenomena has for, thousands of years, to your earlier point, at least guided us in, some notion of a practice or some kind of action to bridge a gap between two states, is probably the most clinical way to say it. And so if we can bridge this gap of change with some kind of action or quote unquote ritual, whatever that means, we can more effectively make that transition without having all matter of weird realities spill in. And that's really what a lot of these rituals came from. Like the one that sprung to mind to me was, we lost Lisa's dad in November last year, and we I think it was 2 or 3 days. We were in the hospital room with him as he was passed away, as he was in bed. Then we were with him at the funeral home for 8 hours one day or so, and then the day before we had been planning his funeral, and everything had been consumed with that, as you do. This is what you do when someone passes away. This is what happens. So then we had the ceremony to close the viewings and the funeral, and we took him to the cemetery and they buried him. And then everybody went to a house and ate and drank and talked. And it wasn't, even though you get through this crushing loss, you go to someone's house to eat, and it's not somber. It's not, it wasn't like anybody was whooping it up, but, people were laughing and talking and remembering, Bill for all the things he had done and the places he'd been and the experiences he'd had and shared with people. And you realize that this in and of itself is ceremony, that this is ritual of some kind. the wake meal. You immediately leave the cemetery or the crematorium or whatever you happen to do with the shell that's left behind, and you eat and you drink and you talk. And to me, this is kind of like, you've spent the past maybe 2-3 days in the presence of the dead, and we're not dead. And so you take that dinner or that ritual, and you draw that line in the sand between you and what you've just been living with for the past 2 days. And you say this, you're just like, Gandalf, you shall not pass this line. And that's kind of like what these things seem to represent, at least as near as I'm making out, is some kind of the line of demarcation to say, from here, I go on, so-and-so does not, but I move on with the rest of my life, and these things don't cross this line. You're also affirming your life of eating and drinking and all of these things that the living do. So there is, and these things, they go across places that you would never even think. I mean, I'm seeing these in all walks of life, these symbolic totems and rituals that seem to bridge the changes of life. And if you think about them, you'll realize just how odd some of them are. And you don't even know why you do them. You've just always done them because it's what we do. And so this seems to me to be a response from, I don't know, some kind of it's like, as George said on the phone to me, I said, do you understand what I'm saying? He's like, yeah, I absolutely do. And he said, you know what? It can only come from interaction with this. This is the only reason for this. There's no other reason for this sort of thing to happen, because change is a big surrounding envelope of these events. And these events are disconcerting to a lot of people. And so, ritual becomes the bridge. So, to be able to expand on things like that, and that's already expanded my thought now into, as you said earlier about Vallee and the control mechanism, I look at, I don't want to ramble on too long here because I can go on about this stuff. I just put up an article a day ago or so, I think. And in it, I'm talking about the higher the education, of somebody coming into the field. How many times have we seen a physicist, a doctor? We've had some on this on Paratopia over the years that were accomplished PhDs, but didn't exactly give us the greatest interview in the world, a la Jeff and Jeremy. You know what vampires are all about, right? Have you seen Twilight? Like, that was a running joke for us, right? But there is a component there that made that joke funny. That is what made that real for you and I. And so you see over and over and over that the higher the education, or the higher the accomplishment or the notoriety of someone in a professional or scientific field or research field that is apart from the paranormal, the more likely they are to fall hard when they enter the paranormal. In other words, these are the people most likely to disintegrate in fairly short order. And I'm sure that a skeptic or anyone would love to say, well, this is just a product of, a scientist, being held to the rigors of science his whole life, and then he finds this wonderful world where he can express his release of logic and all these. And that's an absurd statement to make, because, scientists of every kind have other interests outside of their chosen profession. But, I'm quite certain that bird watching doesn't fall into people losing their marbles if they were a nuclear physicist. So, whereas when it comes to the paranormal, we've seen just about every type of scientific mind believe all matter of crazy stuff. And so, to my thinking now, and kind of what I'm combing through, which is really hard to research this type of thing because it's something that most people I think would rather forget, is, the question I'm asking now is the effect that we're seeing there, is that a product of a critical but open mind? In other words, a scientific mind that can come to this field and do an effective survey of whatever their chosen interest would be in it, and be able to apply the scientific method to it and come out with some kind of meaningful data. Like, that is ultimately, I think, what I think people would believe the goal would be. Like, here's a man who is a man of science or a woman of science, and they're coming here and they're going to try and do something that's going to enlighten us in some fashion. And by all rights, that should be possible. But it seems like just about every time these people fall. And I have to wonder at a certain point if, and it's not an answer by any stretch, but it is an interesting thing if you could bear it out in some meaningful way, that the paranormal, whatever it is, and I don't want to impose some kind of consciousness on it that doesn't exist, but it would target these people because they might be capable of making some quote-unquote progress in the study. And so those people are the first targeted to get the full effect of the crazy, as I call it.
Well, do you think maybe it's actually easier than we think, because you would be doing jujitsu moves, you'd be using the person's momentum against themselves? Because the first thing I think would happen if I were a scientist coming into the field is, one thing that's attractive about the field, I guess, would be that in your own field, you've got such standards and norms and things that you're supposed to adhere to, that it is refreshing to be in a field that explores in other ways and where you don't have to answer to your peers, some sort of peer review or rule by committee or anything like that, or be told you're wrong all the time until proven otherwise. But then also the rock star factor. Now you're a rock star. People are paying attention to you. They want your ear. You're important. Right. That's got to feel pretty good. And add to that the trickstery element of synchronistic events that more than likely unfold in their lives, certainly unfold in our lives. And sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're sadistic, or they feel that way. But either way, the effect is that you feel like you're the center of something. And therefore, the thing that you're studying is real. And it is, therefore, an intelligence outside of you, or so it seems, that you're now interacting with. And although you can't prove this scientifically, it's got to be right there on the cusp. There's something real about this, and you're going to get it. You know, all of these sorts of things that set up self-aggrandizement in someone who is hyper-educated in a culture that puts that sort of education on a pedestal. I mean, in one sense, we don't. In the pop culture sense, it's the Fonzie thing, right? That was cool. Like, oh, education is for losers, or you know what I mean? The nerd. Well, that's sort of turned around, though, right? The nerd is now cool. But in both cases, really on the pedestal was the nerd, because that's the person who would come on TV with a pocket protector and the suit and tie and tell you, take this pill and everything will be okay. This is how they advertised things at us, right? So, You've got that education that puts you on a pedestal. You've got the smarts that put you above average, because you talk to people all the time, and you've got to know that they don't know what you know, and they don't even have the capacity to remember it the way you do. And now you're in a field that welcomes that, and there seems to be a trickstery element that caters to your self-centeredness as well, if you don't know how to watch it carefully. I think all of these things can create a type of madness, if you're not careful. I don't know that that's the case with the specific, vampire werewolf guy we're talking about. Well, because I think there's another problem, which is that this also does attract just sort of loopy people, and that our own putting them on a pedestal is part of a problem, because you can be book smart and not be street smart. You can be book smart and street smart and not have any sort of emotional, quotient to you. All sorts of dysfunctions can happen, but it's just that we put rationality at the top of the list of like what makes a quality human being, right? And it's somebody that we need to listen to and who will know things above and beyond what we know. And it turns out that that's not, that doesn't apply here necessarily. And, one thing that I've been talking about on The Experience is, that with hypnosis, especially, we say about hypnosis, well, we're using this as a tool to retrieve memory because I want to know what my memories are. But really, that's secondary in a way. When you look back on it, really, the first thing that hypnosis is for, I believe at this point, is that it is our way of, quote unquote, coming out of the closet, right? Because if you're gay in this culture, or if you're African American in this culture, the way that you survive prejudice is silence, is to blend in and become invisible as much as possible, until such time as there's a grassroots effort to say, no, enough of this crap. We're going to have a voice and we deserve our equality. Well, with experiencers, although we're not, persecuted in the same way, and I'm not comparing that at all. But what I am saying is that it's interesting because our silence, it seems, was never really silence. Our way of fitting in was not shutting up and hiding. It was to try to make this alien abductions. It was to try to make it a doctor scenario, or, an interstellar prisoners, or whatever it is, some sort of sci-fi story, that was rooted in logic and logical narrative, so that it had plausibility in people's minds. And so enter hypnosis, where you can co-create that with a pseudotherapist, with the same goals, consciously or unconsciously. And so therefore, what we started hiding wasn't the fact that we were experiencers. It was the high strangeness aspects. It was the fact that it didn't fit into the very narrative that we were co-creating throughout the 80s and 90s. We started even just not telling other, researchers the entire story that was happening to us because we didn't think it would fit into what they would consider acceptable. So I don't really remember how that relates to what we were talking about originally. Forgive me, I went off on a tangent there. But maybe I'll relate it back this way and hope that it makes sense in editing, which it won't. Or maybe this is just therefore a new thread of thought, which is that the scientist in coming into this field is trying to, it looks like on the surface, put that square peg into that round hole, right? Like they're trying to take this thing that is not completely rational, not completely knowable, that we can tell, and we think trying to make it that way, right? Like that's what we would hope, or else why is a scientist here? But that scientist may be stepping into this field for the very opposite reason, consciously or unconsciously, because they're sick of doing that, right? And if they're not conscious of the fact that they're sick of doing that, then maybe they start going haywire. Maybe they just start going crazy with the information that that sort of certifies that what they've been doing this whole time with science, with trying to rationalize and explain and dissect everything, that life really doesn't work that way, and they secretly suspected it. But then there's that friction because they can't really say that out loud because they're scientists, and that's not even what they're in this for. So I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Believe me, I completely understand what you're saying. I get it, and I'm sure that in some ways that may be the case for some. But I think you kind of hit it on the head when you said consciously or unconsciously, and I don't see anything that says that these people, when they come into this, are doing this in a conscious manner. In other words, it would be one thing to take a couple of examples and say that this could be, the freeing the ego, the accolades that they would not get in the scientific field they get here, the attention that they don't get in the scientific field they get here, the unquestioned the status of authoritarian, or being the smartest one in the room, that sort of thing. You can maybe apply that to a couple of people, but the problem is that this happens time after time after time after time. It's unending when it comes to people getting into paranormal fields from branches of science. And so, the fact that it happens, in damn near every instance doesn't say those traits to me. This sounds like something else. This sounds like something that is not consciously, it's not logically sound to say that all the people that enter this thing have these traits about them, and that's why this seems to happen. I believe me, I used to think exactly that when I first heard George talk about these things. I think I might have asked him in our first interview with him, well, isn't that just ego? Isn't that, the notion of UFO researchers not sharing data, I think is the way I presented it to him. That they won't entertain science coming in and taking over their investigation, but they also won't tolerate another UFO researcher potentially coming in to their circle and examining the case that they're working on. That kind of territorial response that you get out of a lot of people in this field, the competition, that factor, all of these things, you could easily say, well, that seems like a psychological problem. The thing is when you look at how this is and how it behaves across the board, ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, I mean, look at it. It's everywhere. It's everyone. There is nary a person that I know that in some ways hasn't been affected by this in some way. And so I think to kind of like attribute behavioral patterns or psychiatric reasons, psychological reasons for this, it just doesn't add up. I mean, I completely see George's point to saying that now. I didn't for a long time. I probably thought, there's probably still some truth to the psychology aspect of it, or the notion of ego and all of those things that you mentioned. But the more you look, the more you see it over and over and over, and you go, this like the psychiatric problems don't work like that. And I think you also made a really good point by saying though that this field attracts loony people, and why is that? I mean, it's the nature of what it is. It's the nature of what's being studied. That is really the consistent component part.
Yeah. So doesn't that go with the psychological aspect? Because that's like saying, if you look at hair bands versus anything, rappers, country singers, anyone who's not in rock and roll, any other thing, they seem to attract a certain type of person, right? So that's just the nature of the beast. Certain subjects attract certain people, and those people break down into subcategories. And so what motivates them break down into subcategories, don't you think?
Read the blog. No, I mean, because I haven't written that part out yet. Yes, to a point. Yes, like I'm not disagreeing with that bit. What I'm saying is that when you see the repetitive nature of it's not just the notion of it attracts loony people or that scientists seem, it's whatever level of notoriety or education that they have, it coincides to how hard they fall. It's like a sliding scale where if you are, a tenured professor of psychology and you've written books on God knows what, all sorts of groundbreaking things. When you come to this field, you're going to hit hard. I mean, you're going to start out really well, and then you're going to de-evolve into the Meyer case, that sort of crazy. And then you look at others who come in and they're moderately successful, moderately noted in their field for certain work, but not over the top. They're not, they're successful scientific people. Scientific methodology is very much in their DNA. And yet when they come into this field, the things that they do here, if they tried to do in their chosen field, they'd be laughed out of their profession. That kind of effect you see over and over and over. To me, it can't be put down to a psychological profile. For that and a lot of other reasons that I'm getting ready to kind of lay out, so I don't want to spoil it. I'm certainly not saying that anybody's wrong for saying that.
Have you looked at this, thought about that there are certain psychological profiles that would never get into this? Because as you're talking, I was just thinking about how many people I've heard actually say, before I had these experiences, I was the biggest skeptic on the planet. And then you get into hearing about their life prior to these experiences, and you realize, no, that's nonsense. They've actually either had other experiences or beliefs that were outlandish. They were not the biggest skeptics on the planet. And then you cut to someone who you have profiled, Michael Shermer, who's the biggest skeptic on the planet, and has these things happen to him, and has some sort of bravery to talk about them, but then is beaten back by his own viewing public, and ultimately goes with them, right? Like he sort of shuts up about it, or at least is still in that in crowd of skeptics and debunkers. So he's not willing to make any further leaps, let's say. Do you think a guy like that could have repeated contact experiences or repeated, I guess in his case, it was sort of ghostly spirit type things that were sort of abstract enough that he could tuck them away? But do you think he could have blatant experiences and come forward? Because have we ever seen anything like that before from that personality type?
You've not had anybody who's been a public skeptic who's come forward for that. There have been skeptical people who've clearly been involved with skeptic organizations that have then come out and said, they've had this experience, so they're not sure anymore, and then they begin to study it. But these people never last very long in the fields. They usually don't go uber public with it, whatever they experience, nor their research going into it. They just kind of fade out of the circuit completely. But do I think somebody like Shermer could have repeated stuff? I mean, again, that would depend on a lot of things, including how much time does he devote to the event that already happened to him? How does he treat it? How does he focus on it or not focus on it? What kind of routine is his life in now? I mean, clearly it wasn't just the idea that he was getting married. It was clearly not that he was just, or his life was just in a liminal period at that point. It was also that his future wife, now wife, was also in a liminal period, was also sad because none of her family was there. She was removed from her previous environment, moved to a new home, moved to a new country, moved to a new culture, and was getting married. So this was like, to me, I would have been surprised to hear that something didn't happen of some kind in that house or to them. But when you look at a lot of these things, and you kind of compile them together in these very abstract categories that I'm looking at, you come away with this. I don't know how. I don't want to call it a pattern, because it's not a pattern for me yet. You kind of come with this loose netting that says something along the lines of that it could be that the phenomena happened, of course, because of the life situation that was going on. I'm talking about Shermer's instance here. But you could also say that it was a waste. I mean, as I wrote on the blog, it was kind of almost a wasted experience on him. It had huge impact on her, and yet he makes the statement in the article that his wife said something along the lines of, "I knew my grandfather was here with us. I knew it. He's here with us," or something to that effect. And yet at the end of the article, he says, now my wife shares my skeptical view of matters of parapsychology and ghosts and this. Well, clearly she does not when she says something like is mentioned earlier in the article. And see, this is getting into a whole new direction here when you're talking about skeptics, because skeptics have their own schism to this stuff. And the schism is to explain any event, as Shermer does, or he doesn't really explain it. He just says there are things like this that shake you to your core, but in the end, we have to be open to certain things and open to looking at certain things, but we have to maintain our skeptical viewpoint. And that's a fair statement to make. I don't disagree with that. But you have to look at what response he got back from that, from his community, which was inherently negative. So I think, in answer to your question, yeah, he's not likely to talk about that again, unfortunately. But also, the experience may have happened to him because of who he is. So it was an experience that was pretty profound, in my opinion. All those things lining up together are far too much to ascribe to luck. So when you've got that kind of thing going on, that experience is going to be is given to someone who will then relay it to his community, who will ultimately reject it. I.e., now he's attained a little bit of marginality himself. But the skeptics across the board, again, look at it over and over and over. When skeptics try to explain an interesting case that maybe doesn't have a really explicit answer, in other words, there wasn't a meteor coming down or a satellite crashing, and that would explain the UFO you saw. What if it's something a little bit more hair-raising than that? Maybe it's aliens at the door or at the window, such as what I talked about on the blog. When you've got a rural Kentucky family in a state of anti-structure because they've got someone from out of town there. They're talking, they're eating. It's a get-together, so it's not the normal routine of the house. And the man who just happens to be the one visiting goes out to get some water, and sees the UFO landing near the house. Comes back to tell everybody. No one believes him. And then for the next couple hours, next several hours, they're terrorized by small beings they clearly don't look human, and they can't be killed. They can't be shot with shotguns, right? So Joe Nickel, skeptic investigator, looks into this case. I'm sure it had to have been several years after the fact, and he concludes that that it was owls. They saw owls. And so, when you're talking about the skeptic organizations are very closely aligned with scientific ideologies. And when they are investigating something like this, you will find time and time again a non-logical answer for how they explain these things. In other words, the answer that they give is almost equally as an absurd statement as the witness's statement seems to be. So on one hand, you can say, well, did you really see 3.5 foot, 4 foot tall aliens outside your window and blast the house apart with shotguns, trying to kill them? To no avail, by the way. Or was it you were just scared by owls? And if you believe that a rural, multi-generational, rural Kentucky family had never seen an owl before, had never seen an owl at night at their window before, had even seen an owl in a drunken state, meaning they're drunk seeing the owl, which no one was drunk in the case that I talked about, even if they were drunk, which was, of course, suggested. That doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. That answer of it was owls, and they were at the window, and they're blasting with shotguns at these owls through window, and no one hits an owl that is supposedly a couple of feet tall by a window? Are you kidding me? Like, that's the most absurd answer you could possibly get. And yet, this is what is proffered by the skeptical end of things, and people just go, well, that must be it. So the skeptics are not immune to the effects of this stuff, not by any stretch. And again, you see these absurd, ridiculous answers all the time. People who are supposed to be in worship to the scientific gods of logical and the rational, when it comes to what their end result is, it is often not a rational answer for what they're proposing. So, I mean, it goes both ways. It's not just people coming into this field. It's people trying to debunk things in this field give equally absurd answers to some of the things that they're asked to look at.
Yeah, it seems to me that we've got two options. Either we've got certain types of people are attracted to a phenomenon, or people who are attracted to the phenomenon or come into the phenomenon are turned into certain types of people. That the act of entering the field is to be changed. And interestingly, maybe, I guess, Deb Cobble, I just interviewed her last night, and she was talking about in her house, she had her some wiring redone, and her son is, the big professional at that. And so he's got a meter or some sort of gizmo that reads all the Wi-Fi signals that are going through the house. And she discovered this one corner of the room, of the living room, I believe it was, that had signals. It was like a confluence of, I think, 7 signals from the neighborhood, all just in that one corner of the room. And that's the corner of the room where she can't put electronic equipment because it goes haywire because there's too many outside signals all, creating a tornado of signal in that corner of the room. Is that what this is? Are we like the person entering that corner of the room where you've got all of these crosswire, invisible signals going on all at once, and it just screws with our own wiring? I mean, is that kind of what we're saying here? Outside of, and intelligence is doing it to us. Like those are the choices, right?
Well, I mean, I guess you could frame it that way. I mean, I'm trying not to, I'm trying desperately not to say that the phenomena is, like I know I said earlier, targeting people, but that's a little too being specific to me. I think that whatever answer that I would give wouldn't be accurate. So this is just what happens. I mean,
you can't ask why.
I don't know that I can. Well, I and he's right. I mean, you can ask, but it's that's getting into to me that's getting into the same thinking that that the ghost people have. Like when they renovate something, they say, well, the renovations upsets the spirits. They like it to stay the way it is, and so immediately they're not only saying it's spirits, but then they're also saying they know what the spirit is thinking, which is another absurdity. So it all just becomes this masturbatory exercise and doesn't really get you anywhere. I get what you're saying. I mean, yeah, it does seem like it'd be A or B, but there may be a whole alphabet we don't know about.
Yeah, well, I think it's A. So what we've been talking about, and we're just spitballing. If in case anyone can't tell, we haven't discussed this prior to this show, so we're just spitballing.
No, not at all.
We've come up with 3 different things, and I think the more that we come up with, it isn't because any one of them answers it. I think the sort of usefulness of coming up with different hypotheses or possibilities is to say that we can't answer it, is to illustrate that none of those answers are the answer, that whatever the ghost hunters are coming up with. In fact, something Deb said, because we're talking about why would a location be haunted when people die all the time everywhere? Why are there ghosts everywhere? Yeah. One thing she said about it in terms of buildings being haunted that I'd never thought about is, could it also be that the steel construction of the place, unbeknownst to you, is like a Faraday cage? Could it be that you have too much salt in your diet? Any 2 or 3 things could make you conducive to something else. And I thought, wow, that's really, I had never thought of that, and I think that's the importance of saying it. Not that it's true, but that, wow, that's right. I really don't have the answer to this.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to the ghost thing and where people die and all of that, and this is not to be too horrifyingly morbid about it, but I mean, we live atop the dead. I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, do we really believe that in 500 years, if this culture lasts that long, that the cemetery down the street from you is still going to be a cemetery? I mean, really? And so the very land that your house sits on right now may have been 200-300 years ago. Someone was buried there. Some farmer passed away who used to farm your land, and they buried him in the back field. And that's where Pop-Up was. But that family has since died out. And guess what? Now your house is on top there. I don't necessarily think that that's a prerequisite all the time. Like you say, I don't think that it's always a thing. But yeah, I think to throw ideas at the wall and see what sticks is always a good thing. I guess it's just I feel like I'm right in the middle of this thing, and I'm trying to kind of stay somewhat unfettered from any kind of, I don't know, any kind of, like, I don't want to jump to anything because I've jumped so many times at so many things. And this one, this one seems to be the one that I've been on the longest, and I'm not getting that nudge from whatever the phenomena is that, yeah, you're on the right track. Like you always get those nudges like, yeah, that's it. Wah. And then it does something that completely surprises you and doesn't fit your pattern. The phenomena, at least to me, as I've been writing the blog and just pondering the hell out of this stuff for better part of 3 or 4 years now, doesn't seem, anytime I get really hard at it, doesn't seem to respond to anything, which I think is really curious. That's just from my perspective. Like, I'm not getting that kind of, I'm not getting that kind of proximity feeling when I talk about this stuff to people. I just did, my God, hours on the line with Greg Bishop Sunday night, and I got up and went to bed, not a problem. Whereas if I'm talking about my experiences and I'm focusing on that, or I'm talking with you and we're talking some of these really deep subjects that don't really have to do with a lot of this, the Trickster theorem or liminality or marginality or anti-structure or any of these things. The air seems to change, a la the Colin Andrews interview. You don't get that with this. It seems to back away from that,
Jeff,
which I find interesting.
Was it always that way, or has the Trickster theorem become your routine?
No, it's definitely not routine. I think I'd said to you the other day that that while writing the blog for me has been something that I've always wanted to do. It is odd that it seems to be writing itself. It seems to be incredibly easy for me to write these things and have them be to have a beginning and an end. It's very that's for me is a huge hurdle to overcome when I'm writing anything. And this thing seems to be doing that really easily. So it's definitely not routine because I'm always learning or I'm always being pulled in a different direction, because there are so many directions with this that people, they wouldn't even think about when related to this stuff. And there is so much literature on it. And again, this is not, and I think George would be the first person to say this, is that this whole line of thought, or this abstract line of thought, is not, it's George Hansen to a certain point, but a lot of this stuff's been known for 100 years or more. And like you said to me a week or so ago or more, how odd is it that this kind of thing keeps being known and keeps, it's out there. It's been in literature for 100 years. And, and the notion of liminality and the marginal states and all marginality, important books written in the 1930, years, right there, you've got a lot of information is out there that a lot of the field is very aware of. And yet we're all just so anxious for the next Roswell slide or the next hoax UFO case to come across our plate. It's like we just seem to forget this stuff. And I think it's, I feel like the fat X-Wing pilot, stay on target,
Well, isn't it indicative that this
just hope I'm not Porkins, right? I mean,
is this indicative that it is sort of the transcendental thing in ufology or in paranormal research, that it's so much easier to fall asleep and go back to physical stuff. And in the culture at large, we still basically, including science, treat life as if the universe is Newtonian and mechanical, when Einstein came along and, illustrated that wasn't the case. And then everything that came after him illustrated it's even more fluid than he knew. And so... Right. The first thing that happened was the materialist thing, the mechanical thing. The next thing that happened was more fluid and less understandable. So that kind of makes sense in a way, that we might stick with the easy thing to know. Whereas the ufology thing and the paranormal thing, it seems like the first thing was the fluid part, right? The trickster theory, or any of these sorts of things where the phenomenon itself calls itself into question as an absurdity. That came first. The thing that came second is, UFOs are aliens, Roswell, yada, yada. But we don't stick with that first impulse. And yet, every time we hear it, we go, oh, that's brilliant, and it's hugely popular for a minute. And then we're right back to the mechanical universe theory of aliens and government cover-ups. It's odd. It certainly,
and isn't that interesting, right?
Yeah,
right. So I mean, there it is. I mean, that's
I can see if it never took hold. If it never took root in the public psyche, but like we were talking, last week or whatever about Charles Fort. He wrote hugely popular books. Whitley Strieber's version of "They're Not Aliens, Let's Call Them Visitors" is the most popular alien abduction book ever, right? And yet. People want to call them aliens and not talk about that. Jacques Vallee, who was had a character based on him in Close Encounters and is a legend. And then you look at pop culture and you look at even just the movie Arrival that came out and was up for Oscars, right? And here's a movie that's pushing the boundaries of what we can know. And you go down the list of things, and these are not small movies and small books. These are hugely popular. Lost was hugely popular. And they call attention to the fact of mystery with a capital M. And yet, they're the outlier. They're the thing that goes away. And then we go, I want aliens and answers. What is that? It can only be that they're getting to something that is so much more real that we have to go back to sleep. It's just easier to go back to sleep on it.
I don't know that I'd pull the trigger on that notion, but people, when you look at least paranormal history, some of the most solid, documented, dare I say, scientific work was done very early on, right? And so that's where a lot of this stuff came from. That's where, when we talk about, if you went up to somebody in the UFO field and said, what are the commonalities that you find in UFO reports and the people who heard them, I guarantee you wouldn't hear that a lot of people seem to have marginal elements about them, or were in marginal situations or in anti-structural situations. You wouldn't hear them say any of these things. You'd hear them say, well, I've got a lot of red light reports, right? So you're going to get a lot of that. The idea of consistency or repeated things showing up is relegated in UFO and in ghost phenomena to the phenomena itself. In other words, they're categorizing the focal point, which I guess is not a bad way to do things, but it's only going to get you so far, because that's just the hook. The meat of what you're trying to do is to establish some kind of, some kind of rationale as to going after the answer of, well, what are the circumstances of this? What is the personal circumstances of the observer? I don't know when the paranormal is going to, what aggravates me about paranormal people is they're the first people to jump on this quantum thing. Like the quantum theory explain. No. Hold on a minute. So the quantum thing, one of the big tenets in that is the observer, right? The importance of the observer. And when it comes to the observer in your own field, you don't ask the questions that are supposed to be asked of an observer of this phenomena. You don't ask anything. It was, maybe were you drinking or were you taking drugs? But that's maybe as far as it goes. We don't ask questions like, how's your life? Are you in a stable relationship? Is your job stable? Are you working? Are you becoming financially destitute? Are you, God knows, there's a billion questions you can ask without being overly intrusive about things. But we don't ask those questions. These questions don't come up. And that's unusual to me because, again, the earliest work was probably some of the most solid and scientific work that was done. And they have found these interesting threads. No one pulls them. We just forget about them. We go back to the same old, nonsense of, somebody holding up the shiny object at us. And, and to me, that too is part of, of this stuff. Because again, you mentioned Einstein. Einstein came forth with the theory of relativity. And it's not like science went, great. How about those purple dinosaurs out in Arizona? I mean, that, it wasn't like they cast that aside and forgot about it. Everything was built upon that going forward. This field doesn't do that. Every other field seems to do that. They take a body of work, they review it, they tear it apart, they may try to refute it, but after a while, things begin being built on that. What do we build upon in ufology or in the paranormal? We build upon, and this relates directly to some of our endeavors. The abduction field is built almost completely upon regression hypnotherapy, a nonsensical tool not useful for recovering memory at all, useful for confabulating memory and hardening it to the point where a person believes this really happened. You cannot convince them otherwise. That's what we build upon in this field. That's where all of our compounding theories start from. It's, as I said way back then, it's building castles in the air. We build upon the nonsense rather than take the thing that did show some promise, did show at least something interesting that seems to be a consistent envelope to these experiences or events. No, this field goes the opposite way from that. That to me is very telling because you don't find that in a lot of other fields, So, I mean... Well,
to paraphrase Jacques Vallee, the only materially consistent thing in these fields is the witness. And so the phenomenon itself is being told through the subject, through subjective means. So at some point, you got to ask, does science even have a place there? And if the answer is no, or if the answer is yes, but it's limited, the other answer to that cannot be, well, great, free for all. Let's do about everything, which is what they've decided to do.
Right.
But I guess I wanted to ask you, do you think it's possible that part of this denigration of rationality, ironically, as the people who are denigrated believe they're searching for a rational answer or have one, do you think it's possible that in the late 18th century, early 19th century, we had this thrust of spirituality, science, and science fiction, and probably art in ways that and I don't, all like came roaring into humanity, and since then it's been a downhill slide, and so UFO research is just a casualty of the fact that we had sort of a scientific orgasm, as it were, And now we're bathing in the afterglow of, yeah, that's how things are. It'll be answered at some point, or it already is. Like just that sort of false sense of security but it's gone. Like the actual thrust of really smart people that doing innovative things, trickle here, trickle there, but that's gone.
Didn't last anyway.
Yeah, that impulse is gone for now. You think that's part of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's again, you can look at it from the get go, but that's not to say that. I still don't want to. I still don't want to give the impression that that back then even that there weren't casualties or questionable people involved at one point or another. I think as the field has grown, we're getting a larger bit slice of what kind of dynamic effect that the paranormal has on the individual, the group, the organization. But back then, this was all a lot more, to me, it was a lot more, we didn't, number one, we weren't connected by any kind of internet, which is a big thing. Ironic that the thing that was supposed to be so, you could get information at the drop of a hat has turned us all into slobbering morons.
Well, you had to care to be able to search out information back then, right?
Exactly. You had to care, and you also had to, publish books and papers because you wanted people to see your work or to look at your work or to hear what you had to say about it. And so all of that, today we got the ease of that kind of thing. Back then it was a real effort. And so I think you had more, I think you not only had more driven people about it, although today there's certain people who are pretty driven, as it were, for the topic, but I don't want to make the mistake of saying that, well, back then everybody was top notch, and no, it's just that a lot of the stuff that was done, I don't know that there was more moderation. I don't know that there was less obsession with any of this, but what you can say is that the early work that came out of paranormal research or spiritualist research at that time does hold up, whereas the stuff that's come since then looks like a Looney Tunes cartoon in comparison. That's not to say there aren't people doing academic work today. There are, but even the parapsychological community that I think a lot of the paranormal field, in other words, the UFO field, the ghost groups and all that, they look up to the parapsychologists. And I think what they don't realize is even that field hasn't moved in probably 2 decades. They haven't done anything forward pushing at all. There's just not been anything done. I mean, the Rhine Institute, when's the last time you heard anything significant being published from there? You just don't hear it. It's not only that. I mean, I mentioned about stagnation in the UFO field. It wasn't just the UFO field. It was every field to do with this stuff. I think the reason it hasn't been pushed forward is because people don't build upon what was marginally successful or interesting and compelling work. That work has not been expanded upon, and so you gravitate, the idea that it gravitates towards the ridiculous, is to me a part of it as well. Yes. Yeah.
But I bet you dimes to dollars, there's still an invisible college out there, before it was people like Vallee hiding from, the scientific authorities, and talking about this, I guess Hynek coined the term, right? Invisible college, to talk about it so that they wouldn't get laughed at. They could speak about these things publicly. But now it's so that you don't get picked up on by the very community that believes it is studying this phenomenon itself would be the reason to have an invisible college, because it's not because you're being laughed at for lack of belief. It's that you're being acknowledged by the laughing stock that is the field would be the reason to keep silent now. But I hope and pray there is still that invisible college out there of really intelligent people looking into this. I think we can't, in society here, downplay the notion of idiocracy that we see all around us, because in large part, I think we have replaced intellectual curiosity with brutal arrogance that gets upset because you know that that person is an unthinking person. You know what I mean? Like, don't tell me I'm not thoughtful. Yeah. F you has sort of replaced actually being thoughtful. Just you deserve equal consideration. Has replaced actually being an equal of any intellectual standing, and that's got to affect this field, right? Like that's all part of it. But then,
without a doubt,
even if we didn't have that, the field is still, like you're saying, has the element built in of turning things absurd in some way, or turning things inside out, or defying expectation. You know, whatever that expectation is.
Well, I mean, you can look at, and this is just to give you an example of what I mean by, say, what is potentially at the end of a trickster theorem being fully understood, and then kind of looking at that in the broader sense. In other words, not looking at it so much in a paranormal light. You can look at what's happened in the United States where, and I don't want to get too far afield into this, but because this is a whole nother discussion that I'm not having with people anymore. But we've certainly seen a proliferation of dumb lately. And I find it really odd that there has been big changes in the recent, I don't know, let's just say 3 to 5 years. There's been radical changes in the male-female profile, the notion of the notion of change in gender changes. It's out there like it's never been out there before. We are definitely into some kind of transitional phase with the male-female roles. I think anybody who pays attention to any kind of news media can clearly see that, by the start, I think probably the start of it was probably where gay folks could get married. Something as simple as that. Like, why should anybody care about that? But they did. And and that was a hard transitional period to go through. Now we're going through this thing where we've got Bruce Jenner, an Olympic athlete, is now a woman. And and that has brought all sorts of gender issues to the forefront, where now these boundaries are being tested and blurred. Blurred is a really good word, where we're in that blurred transitional phase, and now we've got all sorts of weirdness occurring that you would never have expected 2 years ago. I mean, you would never have expected that after the massive financial crash at the end of the Bush presidency, you would never have believed that this country would ever put someone of financial privilege in the office of president again. And yet, here we are. So there's all sorts of interesting hallmarks and interesting changes that are going on society-wise and cultural-wise that seem to be affecting mass consciousness. Again, I don't believe any of this is consciously happening. This is just what happens in periods of radical change. Now we've got these blurry lines all over the place, and you see what's happening. I mean, that's kind of where a topic like this goes. You start to recognize certain things that there's nothing you can do anything about, but that you can immediately recognize the pattern. And I think that's an important bit to always try and figure out, is like, to see the pattern of, as you say, the gravitation towards these easy or capitalist-driven answers in the way of the paranormal. Because you and I are not going to be put on a program to talk about Trickster Theory on Fox or on, whatever, A&E. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Huh. So, who you're going to get is going to be the crazy haired guy to talk about aliens are here, and you're going to have, the ghost hunting people who, the more you look at these people, the more marginal they look. And dare I say it, it's pretty much across the board. But does that mean that they're not getting the results that they want? No, I think they are getting them, and they are getting them because of what they are and who they are and how they behave with each other. So all of this, microcosm of the paranormal, just you can expand it tenfold out and see very similar things going on. So I don't know. I'm not sure where any of it's going, but I'm enjoying exploring this stuff and finding these little things that seem to be pushing into a direction of some kind. And here's the thing. I don't expect any kind of like mass readership of the blog. I don't expect it to make any impact on this field whatsoever. So I'm not going to be disappointed. I won't be disappointed. Because I have to be honest with our listeners, I think I've expressed this before. I was pretty disappointed in the reaction we got from Project Core. Greg Bishop, actually, when I told him, I said, between him and Tim Binnall, they're the only two shows that had us on to even talk about it. And he said, he laughed and he says, that's absurd. And I said, well, it's the truth.
Well, there was that Future Theater.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay.
That quickly became about anything else.
Right. Right. And that, again, is something that just happens in this field. That is what goes on. And so when you learn to expect these things, it eases your mind about things. It just does. It doesn't, not saying that certain things still won't aggravate you or upset you, because, my God, it does get to be so palpable sometimes. But you learn to expect it, and you learn to look at it as a part of the phenomena, and you learn to kind of compartmentalize that into what you're studying. So hoaxes and all of those kind of things, those all fit into this as well, which I'm going to be covering on this blog if I can. I got so much to write. It's ridiculous.
Well, you just reminded me of something I wanted to say way earlier, and maybe it was one of those things that I will pave over with editing because my memory is not working tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on this show. I don't know why.
Yeah, mine either. Yeah.
But the notion of how insulated we were, or unpopular, whichever way you want to put it, and yet had a great effect. Well, let's put it this way. We had the effect on the field that we would not be invited to things because of how on to it we were. And in some sense, I guess we sort of thought, like, okay, we're either being ostracized for the Emma Woods stuff. Yes, check. Maybe the phenomenon itself is protecting us. Okay, perhaps. But maybe there's this third thing to it. While the field says it wants the cream of the crop stuff, when you present the cream of the crop stuff, you become inoculated against those very people who say that they want it. They ignore you. Which is something that we've talked about 8 million times, right? But like that is really, you could see that happen with us, I think. We would put these things out there, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about Emma Woods, which is, hurting their bottom line, so to speak, or Trickster Theory, which is not. It's almost like it is a self-enclosing thing where and maybe this ties into the replacing anger and arrogance, where that's the replacement for critical thought. They espouse critical thought, but when they're confronted with actual critical thought, they become angry and they go away, or they just don't get it and don't want to get it, and they go away, and that puts you in the little box. So even someone like George Hansen doesn't get invited to many speaking gigs because who the hell wants to deal with that guy? He might actually be onto it.
Exactly. Who wants to confront that?
Right. And this is the opposite of the rational thing. This is the opposite of the scientific method. This is the opposite of any of those things. And maybe this even ties into, once again, why do scientists go crazy when they come into this field? Because it's like the riptides in the Pacific, it's these cross currents, that are breaking up the Fukushima radiation. It's like you can't be a sustained force on your own with these cross currents. You're going to break up. Right. Even though the field itself is enticing you with the promise of, we want to hear what you have to say, and we want critical thought, and we want new voices, and we respect and honor.
We want science involved.
PhDs, right? No.
Right.
We want a new thing to put on a pedestal and go, why come we can't go to Mars? This lawyer here is gone.
Well, and that's a perfect lead into this. And it's to say that essentially what you might label, and this is no means picking on the UFO field in particular, because this goes across most of them, is kind of this schizophrenic behavior that's exhibited, not only, I'll put it to you this way, from the smallest group of ghost hunters to the largest group like MUFON. I mean, what I had written on the blog about MUFON just in the last post was that MUFON touts its mission statement on its website's About page, and here's what their goals are. Number one is to investigate UFO sightings and collect the data in the MUFON database for use by researchers worldwide. That's one. Number two, to promote research on UFOs to discover the true nature of the phenomena with an eye towards scientific breakthroughs and improving life on our planet. And number three is to educate the public on the UFO phenomena and its potential impact on society. And the disturbing part about that is, quote, with an eye towards scientific breakthroughs and improving life on the planet. And for that, I say one only need visit the Symposium 2017 link on the MUFON site to see how inherently the opposite of scientific MUFON is. Speakers include such individuals as Andrew Basaggio, who, among other things, claims to be a time traveler and a Mars space explorer. I mean, this is a group that has a page on its website about scientific discourse. Like, this is schizophrenic behavior. This is not normal. This is serious. Like, if this was a person, if this were an individual, we'd be looking sideways at him like, are you serious? You have a look at their experiencer research page, and you see the director and many of the associates there are big proponents of hypnosis as memory recovery. Again, it's a tool widely known to be useless for that endeavor and is potentially dangerous. It doesn't matter. This has not either reached them or they don't care. So you can go on with the issues. But when it comes right down to it, these are the reasons that science doesn't get involved. Like, MUFON pretends to be a serious investigative body scientifically trying to examine UFOs. They are not. They are the opposite of that. If anything, I find it hysterical that their number one thing is to investigate UFO sightings and collect data in its database for use by researchers worldwide. Have you ever tried to get one report out of MUFON? I challenge anybody, try it. Try. I mean, I don't mean just whatever they throw out to the public on a website. I'm talking about get a paper report to get something from a case, a complete case study. Forget about it. It doesn't happen. So all of these things, contribute to the field being considered marginal. That's it in a nutshell. You could literally argue that MUFON, number one, doesn't do science, doesn't share reports, don't publish academic papers, don't submit for scientific independent review of anything. This is all things that science does. It effectively marginalizes itself as a body. It marginalizes itself, And so, God, I mean, this happens time after time after time. Again, you don't find this in any other field. You don't find this in, bird watching or rock collecting or, Any other specialized, it doesn't happen. It happens here, which is very interesting to me across the board. Very interesting to me. But it's amazing how marginal.
Focusing on the witness as the only material thing is kind of a radical idea, though. I mean, it sounds like self-evident now, thanks to George and Jacques Vallee. But even as I was reading this book, right, and one of the things Jacques talked about was how many early UFO cases there are of things coming from the sun, UFOs sort of emanating from the sun. And as I was reading this, I'm thinking, even now, as I was reading it, I was thinking, God, I wonder if there are still that many cases. And he relates it to the Fatima case, like he relates that as something also involving objects coming from the sun. And this was something that I thought I must have read somewhere at some point and just forgot, because people talk about the sun as a portal or a wormhole or something. And I think, God, that's crazy. Where does that come from? Well, it probably comes from Jacques Vallee's observation that a preponderance of UFO cases seem to emanate from the sun. So again, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, well, is that true still? Do people still report that? I don't seem to remember that. And that's kind of a normal thing to think. A fantastic thing to think is that there's a wormhole and, come back up with all this backstory. Maybe Lemuria is on the other side of that wormhole. That's sort of the fantasy thing that ufology goes for now. The scientific thing might be to study why it is that things would be coming from the sun, that whole thing. But I think the radical notion is to step back, as I didn't even do reading it. I just thought of it now when I was listening to you. Why did we never step back and go, well, wait, why were these people staring at the sun? Like, who are these witnesses that are staring at the sun all day, seeing things coming from it? That's a pretty hard thing to do. But I think that would be a radical notion to ask, well, what were you doing staring at the sun, as someone is trying to relate the most important thing that's ever happened to them?
Right. Well, because that's where Mama told me that's where the fun is.
Yeah.
Only select members of the audience will get that.
I'm not one of them, but I laughed.
Cue chopsticks.
That's got. Is that an Iron Maiden reference?
No, it's Blinded by the Light, for fuck's sake.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mama always told me not to look into the heart of the sun, but Mama, that's where the fun is. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the radical idea is to go to the source point. Like the source point question is, why are you looking at the sun? And the answer to to everything from ghosts to UFOs to I mean, I would even go so far as to say the cryptid thing, because I had heard. And I don't know how much I believed it at the time, because I've never been so into the cryptid thing. But in the course of looking more and more at this, you start hearing more talk of this notion of a Bigfoot sighting happens at a certain longitude and latitude in the United States, let's say in the the eastern seaboard, and within a week's time, there's a significant UFO report in that general vicinity. Again, it's over and over and over. What is that? I mean, again, we have to look at, forget the UFO, forget the Bigfoot. What's going on in that community, that area, that parcel of land? Is it being developed? What will happen after this? This is a big thing that I'm going to be writing up in the next few weeks, is what happens after. Like we always focus in Trickster thing about, well, what happened? What was your life like? What were you doing? What was happening? But what about the after? You'll see very few paranormal people, researcher or otherwise, ghost group or otherwise, asking questions of witnesses or of families that they've done an investigation for a year, 2, 3 years afterwards. You don't find that kind of follow-up. If you do, it's rare. And even then, it's, well, have you seen anything lately? Have you seen the little girl in the hallway, or have you seen the UFO in that part of the sky again? It's never what's happened to you. How has your trajectory changed since this event? Has it changed since this event? This is something that you don't often find.
Well, even with the big things like Rendlesham and Roswell and all these sorts of cases that they trot out, it's always trotting out new evidence to support those cases. It's never, so what happened next? That was
right.
8 million years ago. What's happened to you since then? Well, the only person to really tell you is the one who told you on his own, which is Jim Peniston. And he's like, here's what happened to me. And then it's a bunch of nonsense that but,
right.
People aren't, like you're saying, aren't asked. And to that effort, I would love to see, and I've mentioned this 8 million times. In fact, I just wrote it to Whitley Strieber today. Will somebody please do a documentary or pitch a Hollywood script about Gulf Breeze? Because, again, a town sees this thing, has a mayor who's involved with the cover-up with this boy, all this stuff, plus the Gulf Breeze 6. It all goes, years and years of entire town seeing this, it all goes away. You never talked about it again? Did you suddenly have amnesia, Gulf Breeze? Like, what happened? What are the conversations in your family like right now? Why is nobody interested in that? That just seems like that would be phenomenally interesting. Well,
Gulf Breeze is what I'm writing right now. That's literally the post that I'm writing right now. It's a lot. Oh my God. Number one, it's so much more than, the 1987, 86, 87 stuff. It goes way back into the 50s. Probably even earlier in the way of UFO reports and sightings and weird stuff. I was talking to somebody last week about it, who had been stationed in Pensacola and had gone into the town of Gulf Breeze to drink or to have fun or go dancing with chicks or whatever. And he said, that place is a haven for some very interesting people. And so I've been exploring that a little bit more. And you mentioned a couple of them in your opening to that. Yeah. It's number one, it's a very strange place. But there's also a component of the people there and what happened to that community as a result. The aftermath of the UFO wave that crept over that place for years, there was an after effect. It was lingering. And I haven't spoken to anybody there probably in a few years, so I may have to make some calls to people that I know down there, just to see what's it like now. What is the climate like as far as the people go? Who's passed away and who hasn't, which I don't know from that original, back in the 80s, what was going on. So it could be interesting, but again, the aftermath of that was horrendous. It really was. A lot of people falling out. A lot of problems with relationships, both public and personal. It really descended into quite a fiasco, and it couldn't be attributed to anything other than the effects that we're talking about on this blog. There's no other explanation for it. It's not logical. None of the when you've got and that community is, I'll say, it's relatively small. It's not a metropolis by any stretch. It's relatively small, and it descended into something that you wouldn't recognize from the start. But I'm trying to get people to go on record with statements like that could tell me a little bit more without naming a lot of names. Like, can I make the case here without embarrassing people? Because that is the danger in writing pieces like this, is that, and I'll say this, I said it on the blog, nothing that I'll be writing about is meant to be an attack on any organization or anyone personally. It's just these are the things that need to be pointed out, and often the things that need to be pointed out are not the most comfortable things in the world. I'm going to be even talking about some of my uncomfortable bits in regard to all this. So, these are just things that need to be pointed out because nobody is immune here. Me and Jeremy are not immune to this sort of thing. Nobody is. It's across the board. It's just in varying degrees, and it's being able to recognize it. I think that's the most valuable thing learned from the pioneers 100 years ago, who said there seems to be this component of this, that, and the other that translates today into anti-structure, marginal elements, and the binary opposition thing, and all of that. That's what that transitions into, and that becomes the observation deck by where you can predict certain things about this field. You can see the way things are going to go. You can expect the outcome of cases. I don't know if I mentioned to Greg or it was Soraya on the other show that the Coach John refers to me as the Nostradamus of ufology, right? because I can like call it out, like that's what's going to happen, and they do, and I don't know that I consciously integrated all that stuff from the get go and was able to do that. I just always figured it was because I'd been around so long and I'd seen repetitive events happening the same way, unfolding the same way in this field over and over and over, and that in and of itself is a clue to all of this, is a point to all of this.
Can I make a prediction, Jeff?
Yeah.
I predict, you're still doing the camera thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
The public cam. I predict you're going to be getting a lot more stuff on there that is of supernatural origin. Because I think I just figured something out, Jeff. I remember in the old incarnation of Paratopia, I always asked, if we ever fleshed this out, would the phenomenon respond? Like, if you took the mask off, would it respond in some way by going, yep, here I am, this is the real me? If we stopped reacting to it, yada, yada, yada. And it seems like perhaps the answer is no. What it does is, it's since the field has switched, and it used to hide from anybody with a brain inside of yokels going, I saw a UFO. Now it's the other way. Now it's people who are serious, like you, who are having these experiences, and the field is full of yokels who won't pay attention to you for the reasons we already described. And so it can afford to do the real thing from you in you, and no one will pay attention to it.
Yeah.
It hid in dishonesty. Then honesty became the outlier, and now it hides in that outlier called honesty from the freaking field of dishonesty. It's that strikes me as something that's going to happen.
Well, we'll see.
Well, think about it. You had a light switch flip on, right? Like, no one's in the room. Oh, yeah. You see the light switch flip on, the light goes on. This is on video.
Yeah.
If anyone else had this on Facebook, it would be like, holy mackerel. The only way that you could get is, the Andrew Basiago, whatever his name is, crowd, that type of, that enormous crowd behind you, is if you were to promote it as, that you were some sort of space Jesus, or aliens are in my house right now, that sort of thing. Whatever the big thing is, the big sensationalist thing is, if you had that claim,
have to be that what's that guy's Vanderblog that he's cut pictures out of like Billy Meyer beam ships and photographing them close with an Instamatic or whatever, saying that these are really there. I think Nancy Talbot's onto that one. She's and the guy cuts out like silhouettes of aliens, like out of white paper, and holds them close to the camera, and takes pictures, and everybody is amazed. I'm like, I don't know, man, I don't get it. Like, we found he's got one that's, it's a ghost of a German soldier from World War II, and yet, and when you read this stuff, right below it, she's got a picture from a book of this soldier. Like, there's the picture and there's the manifestation. No, it's the same thing. Like no, it's, seriously, if I can find a link to that should be a blog post on on numinous then all on its own, because that is the most marginal case I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the whole notion of the critical mind, just letting go is never more. I mean, it's never been seen more effectively for me than there. Because Nancy Talbot is not a stupid woman, not by a long shot. But I am just not understanding where that's going or what that's about. I am not seeing it. I don't see the fascination one iota, and you don't hear much about it. But when you do, these people are extremely into Robert Vanderplug or something like that. Just look around on BLT research and see what you can find. But, it's a scene, man. I kid you not.
Well, again, this is, we have talked in the past about video evidence and Photoshop, and you just told me about this scary sort of audio version of Photoshop coming out.
Yeah.
And this is where it's going to be impossible to tell the difference between fakes and real stuff, right? And like, this is what our fear is that the technology is going to get so great that, it'll be completely render that type of evidence useless. But that's not what this phenomenon is about. The phenomenon seems to be about presenting a reality of itself and also hiding that reality in the presenter, which depends on who's looking at it, right? So that's what we're saying. Like, almost like that video evidence and photo evidence is superfluous at this point, because here's Jeff Ritzmann, who has the real thing, and you're not going to not believe him because other people can fake a light switch going on. That's not the problem. You're going to not pay attention to him because he doesn't have that fantastic backstory that you're really looking for, because you don't really care about the evidence. And that's where the field is at. And I think that is the turnaround. That has been the confusing thing to me, right? Has been like, didn't ufology used to be really good? Weren't there real scientists and people like really intelligently looking at this? And wasn't it that the people who got laughed at were like, it was the old Inquirer, Southern Hick, I saw a UFO, ah ha ha, little green men from Mars, that you could easily laugh at. Well, now the witnesses to the real stuff, perhaps, are not so easily laughed at, and therefore they're not going to be paid attention to.
Makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but then we shouldn't expect anything to make sense. So I don't know. I don't know if that would be, the way it would go or not. I mean, you can try and predict it, but it always seems to surprise you. I don't know. I don't know. We've not gotten much on those cameras. I mean, Greg had asked me about that on Radio Mysterioso Sunday, and I think that show should be posted by the time this thing is airing, so you can listen to that. We've gotten the light on the ceiling, we've got a light coming on and off, and we've got an EMF or an EM hit, pretty significant one that is very odd, because that meter has not gone off again, ever. One time it went off, that was it. And there was no weather outside that would have contributed to that. So, I don't know what to make of that. So I guess I probably should have been more clear about, or maybe I was as clear as I could be about the notion of the cameras and what their purpose is. I mean, the purpose is, I think I said something along the lines of, we're not looking for like any amazing proof, quote unquote, of what's going on. What we're looking to do is, by virtue of action, can we attain some kind of response, any kind, in the phenomena? And I think that has already happened. And as I was talking to George the other night, I said to him, there were 2 nights in a row where I forgot to turn the cameras on, and both nights I woke up at 4:50 a.m. One night I heard somebody running down the steps and whispering, and the other time I woke up, again, I wake out of dead sleep, which does not happen in my life. Like, I sleep like the dead. This doesn't happen. I woke up 4:50 the next morning, exactly the same time, looked towards the bedroom window, and there was golden light streaming in to the room. And as I went to lean up, it slowly faded out. This was not a car light. There's no way a car light's getting up here anyway. There's no rhyme or reason why that should have been happening. And yet there it was. And it was only on the nights where I had forgotten to turn the camera on. Not that I purposefully turned them off or left them off, but that I had completely forgotten about them totally. That's when something happens. Now, I didn't get those events on any kind of recorded media, but that is still incredibly valuable data for me to get my hands on. When I forget, this happens. So what we've done now is we've taken the cameras and we put them on a schedule where they come on their own. I don't even think about them. They've only been running like this for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days, but they come on now at an appointed time. They turn off at an appointed time, and it should always be when I'm asleep. So that way, I'm kind of out of the equation of being routinely turning them on every night before bed. All of that seemed to have an effect. The routine of turning them on had an effect. The routine or the non-routine of forgetting about them entirely had an effect. And now we're trying with turning them on and not even knowing, like it's not a random. I would love it if I could randomize them between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. to turn on. I don't see a way to do that. I am talking to Nest about that. But I think it's good enough for the time being to just remove myself from the equation completely. And I'll be in bed when they come on. I won't know if they're on or not. And that way, like George says, if it's something that is somehow depending on you or your action to make something happen, then if you remove yourself from that, what will happen? Again, any data that I get to me is valuable to know. And so when the two weird things that happen happen on the days where I forget to turn them on, that in and of itself is an interesting piece of data. So I even look at the failures as successes in what I can know about this stuff.
Very good. Well, maybe this is where we should leave it, because anything else I want to say is going to be a whole new tangent.
Okay.
God knows we need material for the next episode, whenever that's going to be.
Right. 8 months from now.
Was there anything else that you wanted to get to that we didn't get to?
I had nothing to get to.
Oh, perfect.
So I'm glad that we had something to talk about for 2 hours. So that's good.
Very good. All right. Well, ladies and germs, who can predict the unpredictable show that is Paratopia Oculus? At some point, we'll be back. Maybe next week. Maybe next month. Hell, maybe 10 years from now. We don't know. Do we? Are we going to do this again anytime soon, or what do you want to do?
We don't know.
Do we leave them with hope, or do we leave them hopeless? This is the question.
I mean, we're definitely doing it. I think it's well, I do know that the Paratopia website, the paratopiaoculus.com, is coming up for renewal, and they want a ridiculous amount of money again to renew it for another year. So I'm probably going to end up moving it. We may be down for a couple of days, but don't freak out. It'll be back. And I will put links for Oculus camera feed people. I will send them individual links where they can view the cameras. But I got to be honest with you. And here's another interesting thing. This is really interesting to me. When the cameras are on, there's a little light. It's a green light. It's right above the lens. When someone's watching out there in internet land, it gently pulses. I have never seen a camera pulse, not once. So isn't it interesting that there seems to be very few people even watching them, and yet they were fully funded, which I really appreciate. So you don't have to watch them, but I've never seen one pulse unless I'm like standing there with an iPad looking at the camera, then I'll see it pulse. Interesting. I mean, again, the notion that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people watching them. So I don't know if you're out there and you're listening and you're interested. $20 gets you in the door for the feeds, and that $20 goes to help pay the monthly fee to the cloud service that then stores a week's worth at a time of the video feeds, like all of them. And so if we would capture something, I would have up to a week prior or 3 or 4 days prior to 3 or 4 days after to have control footage, which is important. So we'd have the whole night plus the night before, as well as the night after and the night after. That's what your money goes to. So this is not like going to buy me ramen. It's going to pay. It's going to pay for the cloud service to do that. So, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras going. So that's a lot of money. But I'm making it. It's doing. And I have one benefactor who is, graciously given hundreds of dollars at a time to cover that. But, we're starting to come towards the end of that fundage. And, so like I say, if you want to get in, it's great. The cameras typically run from about 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., sometimes 3 to 7. And that's a lot of time for weirdness to happen. So, we have gotten odd light behavior lately. So I don't know if that's a precipitation for more or what. I don't know.
Let me just throw this out there. What we had talked about, and I had teased publicly, I guess, is that maybe we would end up doing this show weekly again as doing audio commentaries to the old Paratopia show. So if you liked the sort of Emma Woods, David Jacobs commentary, or the Angela Joyner episode where we did the commentary on her episode with Jim Peniston, they're kind of fun and informative, and it's fun to look back, right, on all the old episodes and how we sort of evolved with them. That might be fun to do. And Jeff, if you're still up for it, maybe we should just throw it out there to the audience. Is that something that you guys would be interested in? Would you want an audio commentary show, which isn't to say we wouldn't do just spitball shows like this. It just means that you'd be hearing from us more often than this. Is that okay to throw out there? Do you mind if I do that?
Yeah, I think that the value in doing something like that would. I mean, I don't know that there's been any more movement on things like Jacobs or Emma or Hopkins or Carol or any of that stuff. I think what would be really neat would be to go way back to like Whitley Strieber and like our first interview ever. Some of the interesting guests that we had who we felt were compelling enough to even have on the show, and see what was the I don't know, the stream of thought at that point in time. I mean, we're talking about a number of years ago now. So what was our stream of consciousness like when it came to these things? And then what were they saying? And how do we feel about it now, present day, knowing what we know now? Because I guarantee you, we've had some growth since those days. I was amazed listening to the old George Hansen interview that you had sent me, the first one we did. How much of that I had forgotten. So, to look at something like those, I think that would be kind of interesting to do.
Yeah, so let us know if that interests you. Either, I guess is there a comments thread on these episodes? That is functional?
I mean, they can comment or they can email us at paratopiapodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, or if you're on our Facebook page, Paratopia Facebook page.
Yeah, there you go.
However you want to leave us a note letting us, yay or nay, care, don't care. And we'll start doing that accordingly. Can't promise it'll be weekly, but it'll be far more often. Yeah.
We just Jeremy's got his new website he's doing, and I got the blog and all of that, and it's just like there's a lot going on. So it's not that we're shirking our paratopic duties, but we've got these other things that we want to do, and so we're doing them.
People, we're stretched thin.
No, I don't know about thin, but
Thanks.
It's tough to interrupt the. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. I think it's just it's tough to break a when you're focused on one thing, it's hard to stop and kind of like go back and revisit another and make something happen that's of value enough that we would feel good about sharing it with you guys. So, I mean, that's always kind of been the Paratopia way, is like if we don't have something to say that's going to be of some kind of productive value, we just don't say anything. So, I'd rather do that than just put some willy-nilly garbage out.
Except for today, where we were just spitballing out of nothing.
Well, this is what it's like when Jeremy and I talk on the phone.
That's right. There's always something of importance.
By and large.
Yes.
That's right, because we're both very important people.
Don't you know who I am? No.
Don't you know who I am? No, it turns out no. I don't know who you are. Yeah.
All right, so let us know. We're going to bed.
That's right, we are.
Jeff, thank you for doing this. As always, a pleasure to speak with you.
Hey, thank you. Always a pleasure.